At Doctor Who anniversary specials, they usually celebrate the milestones by bringing back old Doctors or monsters, but the decision of returning showrunner Russell T Davies to recast David Tennant in the role, bring back Donna, and basically pick up his era almost exactly where it left off, minus the odd references to recent events, puts the recent 60th anniversary specials more in line with a cultural buzz phrase that you may have heard in recent years. These specials are basically a legacy sequel, aren't they? If you're unfamiliar with the term legacy sequel, it's part of this collection of buzz phrases that pretentious media commentator type people such as myself have invented, so that we can pretend there's some sort of overarching media through line to describe what's happening in pop culture at the moment. Basically, it's when a major franchise either hasn't released anything for a while, or no one likes the new stuff, so someone in the industry cajoles the original creative team or actors back to do it again, because they're terrified of losing money and they consider it safer than trying to get an audience that subsists on nostalgia and nothing else to actually be open to new ideas. Which, looking at internet discourse in recent years, that fear is totally justified. Yeah, alright, this always happens, it's happened for decades, it's just how the industry works, but you gotta admit it does feel like there's a lot of major franchises at the moment that are betting the house on belated follow-ups to things we were watching a long time ago, with the return of original creative team and actors. Just this summer we had Michael Keaton back as Batman, because Warner Brothers needed a reason for anyone to be interested in a Flash movie at all. A recent Spider-Man film managed to get aging millennials such as myself to care about it by getting Alfred Molina back as Dr. Octopus. Indiana Jones came back to remind us all about the last time we were disappointed by an Indiana Jones sequel. And it's the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, so now we've got 3 specials bringing back the Doctor from about 15 years ago. It does just go to show how huge and long-lasting the impact the Russell era has had on the general public that Russell and David can return to the show, and I'd actually argue they probably didn't even need the previously on Doctor Who segment with embarrassing green screen to pick up on a storyline that everybody had assumed had ended about 15 years ago. That Doctor and Donna's story is so burnt into everybody's brains that they could make references to things like the Doctor can never see Donna again or her mind will burn, and everybody would just go, oh yeah, it's because of that thing he did in Journey's End. When they revealed that they were coming back for this, you could feel that this was going to be a big deal for everybody. But the reason I bring up the legacy sequel factor is because the reason critics such as myself typically roll our eyes at the concept of the original team coming back to pick up a story they left off 15-20 years ago is because, while yes, the general public will jump at it and love it, but will there actually be some kind of artistic point to it? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you get a Fury Road, sometimes you get a Hobbit trilogy. I could already feel this bubbling under the second Russell's return got announced in 2021 because people have been asking after Russell and the 10th Doctor's return since about season 7. I remember strong rumours that this was going to happen at the 50th anniversary. People have been leaving comments on this video I made in 2021 when Russell's return got announced, calling me a prophet for correctly predicting that David Tennant's Doctor would come back along with him. The way people have been talking, it almost seems like everyone expects Russell to come back, Jodie to regenerate back into David Tennant, it to be 2008 again, and for the show to instantly turn back into the cultural and ratings powerhouse that it used to be. But the point they seem to have missed in that video is that nostalgia is fleeting. So I think it's only fair that I remind you of some other things I said in that video now. The problem with nostalgia is it'll drive people to want things, but be completely incapable of articulating what they hope to get out of said things. And I should admit at this point that I'm no better than the rest of you. I am at least partly guilty of wanting this to work for the wrong reasons and in the wrong ways too. I would love for there to be another Moffat-penned episode inside the confines of the Davies era. But do I just want that because it was 2008 and I was 17 and I was young and found the world exciting and my feet didn't hurt all the time? I wouldn't be experiencing something new and fresh, I'd just be indulging in a feeling that I remember. Well, yeah, I was right on the money, wasn't I? Noticeably increased budget aside, the first 2 of the 60th specials were basically some more episodes of Doctor Who from 2008, and the third was basically an episode from 2008 with the eccentricities of that era dialed up by about 900%. The specials are essentially a mini version of a David Tennant Doctor Who season. Special 1 is a big bombastic season opener with a cute monster, a la Partners in Crime. Special 2 is the more horror-focused Base Under Siege piece for the grown-ups, a la Midnight. And Special 3 is the over-the-top season finale, featuring the return of a classic Doctor Who villain, which are basically all of the Russell finales. Tonally, it felt like it was Saturday Tea Time in 2008 all over again, and everybody rejoiced. Well, sorta. I've got a lot of things right over the years when it comes to Doctor Who, but here's one thing from a previous video that I got hideously wrong. Anyway, so everyone seems to be under the impression that the current state of grace that we're experiencing within the Doctor Who fandom is going to be the new status quo, but personally I don't see it lasting that long past 2024, and that's because I've been here before. A few months apiece? Try 5 bloody minutes and then we're back to the fandom being an indeterminate ball of screaming rage again. Anyway, so I'm going to go through these things one by one, but before I do, I'd just like to quickly address the people about to start on your essays in the comment section. Okay, just take a deep breath. There, that was nice, wasn't it? Okay, stay calm. Now, let's do this. Right, Special 1, The Star Beast. One of my biggest bugbears with this period of Doctor Who that these specials are here to revive is that the world feels a lot smaller than it arguably should. This isn't a specific narrative device issue I'm talking about here, it's a vibe problem that I've always had. For example, I never really liked the Doctor, Donna and Wilf running into each other all the time. Yes, people are about to get on my case, the narrative does address the continuous running into each other over and over again.
No, but people have waited hundreds of years to find me and then you manage it in a couple of hours.
Well, just lucky, I suppose.
Over and over again, like something's still connecting us.
But this, combined with the 10th Doctor's tendency to start jabbering about how amazing his companions are all the time, you know what I'm talking about here. Rose was my best friend, oh my god, she was so amazing. Donna, you're brilliant, you're the most important woman who ever lived. It just started to feel after a while that it was less a case of a Doctor Who companion being a random every person who walked into him by random chance and decided to travel with him, and more that the Earth is a planet that's got about 8 people on it who've been designated as main character with lines, and about 30 background characters who might get a "look out Doctor, there's a Cyberman" occasionally. And it kind of undercuts my ability to be surprised by anything, because I already know which ones are important, and I can see these moments coming a mile off. Admit it, the second you see the Doctor go and help that lady with the boxes, you know that out of the billions of people that there are on this planet, that it's going to turn out to be Donna. Maybe I'm just too familiar with the tropes, but did anyone not see this happening? I mean, I get why you need them to run into each other again by chance, because it's not as if the Doctor can get this old body back and make the conscious choice to go and see Donna again, because if she remembers him, her mind will burn and she will die. The thing is though, that part of the plot kind of stops feeling nearly as dangerous when we got the Doctor actively showing up at Donna's house where they've discovered the Meep, and the Doctor's waving his sonic screwdriver around in front of her as if this isn't dangerous at all. The only thing that triggers the memory regression is when they get trapped at the end and the Doctor has to say her trigger words, because if he doesn't then people are going to die. Which yes makes the sacrifice more meaningful, it's just really weird when you're watching Sylvia of all characters treating the threat of the Doctor showing up in their lives again as more dangerous than the Doctor does. And it's weird that he does this after he's been stressing just how important it is that he doesn't even meet Donna again for the first 20 minutes. That being said, I did like the resolution to the Doctor cannot see Donna again story. It didn't undercut the sacrifice the Doctor makes to me, and it made sense that Donna couldn't contain a Time Lord personality in one body, so it's across 2 bodies because she had a daughter. To me, that works. I liked it. I thought it was sweet and narratively justified. Speaking of Donna's daughter, Rose Noble, hey, it truly is a Disney sequel now that it's about the offspring of the characters from the original. Now, personally, the thing that makes me like characters is if they have fine, small, specific details that successfully manage to convince me that this could conceivably be a real person who exists in the real world. Rose Noble is a trans teenager who's been bullied at school. Her parents don't make much money, her mother is clearly suffering some form of trauma over her repressed memories, and she has a small side hustle where she sells stuffed toys she makes herself on the internet. That bit about the stuffed toy business on the end is the important bit to me. It makes me feel like this is a person that I could reasonably imagine existing. A+ working character crafting there. My problem with Rose Noble is one that probably couldn't be helped, and it's that we don't really see that much of her on a personal level. There's a scene with some bullies from school harassing her in the street, but we don't see her at school. We don't really spend much time with her. We don't get much of a sense of how the way people treat her affects her on an emotional level. The reason this stuff isn't in there is fairly obvious. It's a mood killer. While this part of the story makes Rose sympathetic, I personally hate watching bullied at school storylines because it just reminds me of when I was bullied at school. And this is a big celebratory bonanza, so I get why the obvious bits of a story like this aren't in there, and it didn't stop me from clicking with Rose and liking her. It is a good thing when I say I want more from a character, but it's a bit of a dampener that the main thing I got out of Rose was appreciating the Donna is a fierce mother who will do anything for her child angle of the story. I like stories of a fierce mother who will do anything for their kid, but the problem is that's not really showing off Rose's value as a character, it's second degree. I get why the story plays like this, but I do like the idea of Rose Noble, but she just was underused. We also don't get much time with Ruth Madeley's Shirley Ann Bingham either, which was a damn shame as I think she's really cool. I love the way she just bats away people concerned that her disability's slowing things down. I do get a sense that Shirley's probably going to be an ongoing character in this new era, which I'm totally on board with, because otherwise why would they dedicate this sequence at the end of the last special showing the TARDIS has a wheelchair ramp now? By the way, Theris has a great story about this ramp, go ask him, and maybe subscribe while you're there. In terms of plots, as said, it was very much a Doctor Who episode from 2008. It basically mashes together E.T. and Gremlins. I'm unfamiliar with the comic strip story that the meat comes from because, lucky me, this was the one area of the expanded universe that I didn't explore much of when I was a kid. But the Meep is cute and fluffy, and a design like that was always going to capture the public's imaginations. It does look pretty decent as well. Being a combination of a puppet and CG makes it more convincing as a real creature than if it was just straight up CG. The whole thing does look gorgeous, but on the point of the noticeably increased budget when compared with 2008, I did get a sense of the Star Beast showing off to me. That sequence where the possessed unit soldiers and the bug people were shooting at each other didn't half go on a bit. If the budget was slightly lower, they probably would have compensated with more footage of the Doctor and everybody running through the attics, and personally I think that would have made this sequence a bit easier to stay emotionally invested in, because I was kinda tuning out around here. All in all, the Star Beast was light, fluffy, breezy, and exactly what I expected. Good enough, but not much for my brain to chew on. I indulged in feeling like it was 2008 again for about 60 minutes, and then I remembered that it isn't, and the world outside my window is even more on fire than it was back then. And if it was the only special we got, then I probably would have been a bit deflated by it. But fortunately it wasn't, which leads me on to the best thing to come out of the 60th anniversary. Special 2, Wild Blue Yonder. Aside from the rather baffling opening sequence, which is only really in there to set up the episode's running joke that now history has been rewritten and gravity has been renamed Mavity, that aside, Wild Blue Yonder is clearly for the neckbeard Doctor Who crowd, in that there's this stretch of about 15 minutes or so that are basically a big finish story. Just having the Doctor and Donna exploring an abandoned spaceship floating at the edge of the universe is the kind of grand cosmic image that I love in Doctor Who. It's basically a two-hander. There's no one around, no explanation for the current state of the ship, just a nice quiet section of runtime in which David Tennant and Catherine Tate just play off each other, which we didn't really get much time and space for in the Star Beast. It's nice, you know, it's moody and atmospheric. My only issue with this 15-minute stretch is, like with the Star Beast, I feel like they're trying to show off the budget to me. I feel like a simpler spaceship design with moodier lighting would have caused this feeling of dripping atmosphere just radiating from the TV. Because in terms of vibes this section really works, but in terms of looks, it looks like the Doctor and Donna wandering around inside a video game level. I was sat imagining there was a controller in my hands and waiting for QuickTime events to flash up at various intervals. And some moodier lighting would have heightened the horror factor when things get trippy. As a cinema nerd, I really appreciated this sequence here, where a scene of the Doctor and Donna in one room, and the Doctor and Donna in a different room, are intercut, and this style of cut flicks a switch in your brain where you assume you're watching a montage of time passing, when suddenly there's that weird break in their interplay, and the Doctor says that out-of-place phrase, "my arms are too long." And that's when you realise that you're watching two different rooms with two sets of Doctors and Donnas playing at the same time, with an alien copy in each room. That trick it plays by messing with your understanding of visual language is just remarkable, and the entire reason these specials are worth it to me. They were keeping the details of this one under wraps prior to its release, and everyone was thinking the reason for that would be surprise cameos. Oh my god, is Matt Smith in it? Is Carol Ann Ford in it? Is it a master story? But it kind of makes sense when you see it because the shock factor is what makes Wild Blue Yonder work. If I'd seen any of its weird and twisted imagery in the trailer, I would just be sat there waiting for it. The light and fluffy opening, which had me gritting my teeth, kind of started to make sense when I got here because it's meant to lull you into a false sense of security before hitting you with the distressing images. And that's when you make sense of the structure of these specials. Doctor Who always does lots of different things for lots of different people. Some episodes might be for you, some episodes might not be. Having 3 specials instead of 1 means that this anniversary can cover a lot more ground and serve a lot more different people. The first can play to the broad audience with a mashup of Gremlins and E.T., the second has the space to be a more adult-centred piece, which is basically Doctor Who does John Carpenter's The Thing. This episode also kind of reminded me of Smile, the horror film, not the Doctor Who episode about the emoji robots. In the way the alien versions of the Doctor and Donna will play on what they know about them to get an emotional reaction and try and trick them into believing they're the real one. I've got to say, I really like this scene where Donna and the Doctor finally stop and have an emotional reappraisal of everything that's happened in recent years. I may not have liked The Timeless Child or Flux, but having what is secretly an alien copy being emotionally confrontational instead of just physically intimidating the Doctor before the realisation that this isn't actually Donna was an ingenious way of manipulating us regular viewers who've been wondering just how the hell Russell was going to address things that have been happening in recent years. It's quite meta in that respect. It's almost like this scene is speaking directly to us before going, "Surprise, Donna's melted!" They could have gone even more meta by having some references to Among Us, because that is basically the episode's plot, isn't it? And of course I have to get to Wilf's cameo, which was a nice surprise and like a nice little hug after an incredibly strange and distressing episode. I think it's only right that the last appearance of Wilf is an understated little scene at the end of the episode, and not a grand over-the-top affair, as his character was always humble, and it's a nice bookend to his first appearance as a newspaper vendor in Voyage of the Damned. That, and I love that his final appearance in the show is him talking about something strange that's happening as if it's no big deal. So yeah, all in all, Wild Blue Yonder gets a big thumbs up from me. Really like this one. It's mad, but it's the appropriate level of mad. As opposed to the next one. Special 3, The Giggle. Holy Christ, that was like watching the living embodiment of sugar. I've got to say, I find it really surprising that it's taken this long for revived Doctor Who to do a Toymaker story. Not because the Toymaker was ever actually all that popular, but because a godlike figure from another dimension with a fetish for retro Earth-based toys, games and circus imagery felt like it was just dying for a 21st century makeover. Admittedly a weird opinion to arrive at given the lack of appreciation for the original serial. People have historically had very polarised opinions of the Celestial Toymaker. Some people consider it a lost masterpiece, some people say it just flat out sucks. It's been hard to find a consensus on it because the concept is a very visual one, reliant almost entirely on a creepy toy aesthetic, and given most of it's a missing story, most fans end up with the opinion that I've got. I think the idea is an incredibly impressive piece of cosmic horror that I can't really have much of a viable opinion on because when I've just got the soundtrack for episodes 1 to 3, you sit and listen to it and you think, God, it doesn't half go on a bit. Power of the Daleks, Fury from the Deep and Evil of the Daleks work as narrated soundtracks. This sounds like it really needs the visuals. I mean, sure there's the Telesnap reconstruction, but it's just not the same, is it? If you want a weird and trippy classic Doctor Who serial, The Mind Robber actually exists and can be watched, and is definitely the viable alternative. There have been Big Finish Toymaker stories of course, some really good ones that actually use the idea in a way where the lack of visuals is the intention. An audio-only production was not the original story's intent, and listening to it, it really shows. So The Giggle does have a reason to exist. To execute a Toymaker story with the visuals this time, and the team have really gone all out on it. It's easily one of the most visually impressive Doctor Who stories I've seen since probably Heaven Sent. So many shots stand out to me, that shot of Stooky Bill catching fire during Logie Baird's TV experiment, the weird architecture sequences where the Doctor and Donna get trapped in the Toymaker's domain, this amazing puppet sequence where the Toymaker walks us through the deaths of the recent companions, the way his shot folds up into that box, that scene where the Toymaker's dancing around and killing people and turning bullets into petals while miming to spice up your life, which I can't believe I just described. It's image after image after image, and you may have noticed the problem. It's totally exhausting. I swear, I felt physically drained and like I wanted to go to sleep about 35 minutes in. Not because I was bored, but because it was that intense. The common problem with Doctor Who Christmas specials in the Russell era, like the next Doctor that I recently covered, was they felt like a kid on a sugar high jabbering in your face for an hour. This goes even faster than that, and the pace of the thing kinda undercuts the potential for quieter moments. I was starting to feel some creeping tension in that opening scene where Logie Baird's assistant goes to the Toymaker's shop, but before that feeling of anticipation could fully develop, suddenly the scene was over. I just want to tell this episode to just sit still for a second. Of course, I know someone's going to point out that that's part of the point. Donna tries to stop the Doctor at a few moments and point out that he never slows down, he's constantly moving. Thematically, yes, the entire thing makes sense, and the Toymaker is this curator of this grand cosmic circus. It's meant to be a dazzling spectacle. But my point is that as a viewer, if it's too much, then as said, I'm exhausted before we even hit the climax. There's not a second to spare. We even have to crowbar in a moment where the Doctor slows down and has a chat with returning companion Mel into a conversation that's had while we're continuing with about 6 or 7 other things that are all moving at the same time. So Mel, how have you been? Oh, I'm good. I work at Unit now. Cool. Okay, back to the episode. I'm not saying none of these things are great ideas. I like Mel, always have done, and I loved seeing her back as a fully fledged companion this week. I also love the Toymaker's plot to make everyone on Earth think that they're always right about everything, and the chaos that a society like that causes. Problem is though, watching the consequences of a world like this basically amounts to a collection of Unit soldiers sitting around in Unit HQ and watching some clips on YouTube played out on a big screen. Aside from this scene near the beginning, we're not actually out there among this chaos for much of it. Most of the action in the present day is in this room. And as we watch the Doctor and Donna go to the Toymaker's domain and then he shows up at Unit and that happens, I almost forgot the stakes in this situation, while the episode kept chucking firecrackers in my face. Oh yeah! Everyone on Earth is going insane and they're getting each other killed in interesting ways. I swear Big Finish are going to need to do about 8 or 9 box sets worth of spin-offs dealing with the aftermath of the Giggle. There came a point where it went so over the top, so past the point of ridiculous, that I wasn't even intimidated by the Toymaker. After they've got out of his creepy toy-themed Saw dungeon, it just goes so over the top, like him turning Unit soldiers into screaming bulls. My point is, you've got insane imagery, sure, but if there's so much of it, I'm overwhelmed, and I can't really feel any sense of foreboding anymore. I'm not going, oh my god, he just killed some people. I'm just going, oh, I just want to lie down, to be honest. Anyway, so this godlike figure who can kill with a thought fails to catch a ball, and that's how he's defeated.
How sad.
I should also note here that I do really like Neil Patrick Harris as the Toymaker. It's a very suitable over-the-top reinvention of the role, and I think he actually proves an interesting counterpoint to a suggestion that I've seen in many online fan communities, because apparently he hadn't actually heard of Doctor Who before getting cast. A common suggestion among fan communities is that an actor being cast as a major role in a franchise needs to be a fan of that franchise already, because that means they'll have an understanding of and a respect for the history of it. In terms of writers and showrunners, maybe, but in terms of actors, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what acting is. The point of acting is to bring a personal spin on a given role. That's the skill an actor needs. When you're acting, you're playing a character. You're not playing a walking entry on a fan wiki. Acting isn't just reading, it's a creative process in itself. You create a character out of the words on the page. You create their mannerisms, their tone of voice, the emphasis that they put on certain words. Neil Patrick Harris will have been given this role and gone, okay, how would a godlike pixie demon say this line?
Oh, well, that's alright then!
And that's down to his skills as an actor, and it doesn't really have that much to do with whether or not he sat and watched a series of blurry JPEGs and read a 40-year-old Target novel. Anyway, I'm actually surprised that anyone's brain cells were still functioning by the 50-minute mark to have any critical thoughts at all on the new spin on regeneration, which I personally don't mind that much. By splitting the Doctor in two and having the David Tennant Doctor with all this history and past companions, the flux and all that garbage, stop travelling and going to live with Donna, that leaves the new Doctor basically free to start fresh. Which, as someone who thinks that Doctor Who canon is far too big, messy and complicated, I think this was actually a really good idea. And I like the presentation of 15 as a confident and reassuring figure for the Doctor, who gives him a hug and encourages him to finally slow down, while this new Doctor goes off to continue exploring. It's also a great visual metaphor for self-care, really like that. I did think it was interesting how we actually got to see Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor in action over the course of the climax, basically using a regeneration as a resolution of a plot instead of a simple handover. The different twist on the regeneration story and them playing off each other in the final act left me with pretty warm feelings towards Gatwa on the whole. All in all, the Giggle was utterly insane in every way, and even more over the top than Russell usually is. I was impressed by it, sure. I'm just hoping that we'll get something a bit calmer at some point down the line. Because if this era is going to have this kind of frenetic energy all the time, Okay, I'm not saying I dislike these specials, but if I didn't already feel like a dinosaur watching Doctor Who, I feel like a bloody fossil after that one. Anyway, in conclusion, the big question. Did these specials recapture the glory days of late 2000s Doctor Who? Tonally, yes, but overall, well, no. While not recapturing the original culture can be framed as a criticism, the fact of the matter is that a legacy sequel is never going to recapture a franchise's past glories. They can be good as a singular experience while watching it, but a legacy sequel won't truly revive an era that's been and gone. The Hobbit trilogy was never going to recapture the magic of the Lord of the Rings trilogy because the environment of cinema had changed in the decade between Return of the King and An Unexpected Journey. Likewise, the entire landscape of broadcasting has changed since the end of time. So the promise of these specials was always going to be a brief burst where the show would go, "Hey, you remember that?" And everyone goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And then they go back to whatever they were doing before the show went, "Hey, remember that?" The problem with the legacy sequel concept is that they're usually encouraged by studios and broadcasters who know that people will tune into a thing that they already know they like. And usually they get the results in the short term, but they're almost always brief sparks that will burn out on people pretty quickly. The specials have reminded a large chunk of the general public that forgot Doctor Who still exists that, hey, it's still doing things, and some of them might stay tuned when the new stuff starts, but that's all a legacy sequel can really do. I enjoyed these specials for what they were, Wild Blue Yonder in particular, but I would wager that they're probably going to end up being seen more as a curiosity in years to come. Not totally a bad thing, of course, as that's about 90% of the good stuff in this franchise. But like most legacy sequels, I see most people watching them in the future once for the sake of checking them off the list of stuff that they have to see.